Hey, it's Dave from the camera store, and I'm vlogging, so that must mean we're talking about a vlogging specific camera. In this case, it's the Sony ZV-E10. This is the Sony ZV-E10, and it's the latest camera from Sony that is purpose-built for vlogging. Now, is it just basically an A6100 that has some new features? I want to talk about a bunch of the new stuff, things I like about it, things I don't like about it. So let's get into it. The Sony ZV-E10 and the Sony A6100 do have a few things in common. They both share the same 24 megapixel APS-C size sensor and the processor and the battery, but that's where things kind of change. First thing I noticed about this camera is it has a proper articulating screen. And I like seeing Sony make a trend towards this. The screen articulating out to the side is a much better way of making things work, especially when it comes to vlogging. If you take a look at the top of the camera, you're going to notice a few things. One, we have a giant microphone screen here, which we don't have on any of the other 6100s or above cameras. Now that's pretty cool, and I'm going to jump into this a little bit more later. Besides that, we have the on-off sliding toggle. We do have a very large red button here, and that's for our video functionality. And above that, we have a shutter button with a toggle switch, which is unique. If I'm using a power zoom lens, I can choose my focal length by toggling through this switch. We also have the defocus button over here, dial on the top here for controlling our aperture or shutter speed depending on the mode we're in. And on the back of the camera, we have a lot of the similar buttons we've seen with all the other Sony cameras. How to get into your menus and change your frames per second, that kind of stuff is all right there. We also have a custom one button here, which is by default set up to be the background blur button here. The other big thing that's on top of the camera that we saw in the ZV-1 is a much better microphone, and I'm going to go much more into this in a little bit, but it takes up a big spot on top of the camera, and we give up a flash because of that. Now on the side of the camera, we now have a microphone jack and a headphone jack, which is crucial for shooting video content. This camera uses the same W battery found in the 6100, although Sony claims you actually get about 20 more shots per charge, about 440 on a full battery. Now the one thing I think they're omitting on this camera, which kind of upsets me, is an electronic viewfinder. We no longer have that, so we have to rely on the rear screen. It's not a bad screen, and it is quite responsive to touch. However, Sony has done it again where they've restricted the touch functionality to only using it for autofocus points, not for navigating the menu. Still don't know why they did that. Overall, this is a really small, compact camera. It comes in at 343 grams, which is slightly lighter than the 6100, and a little bit smaller overall as far as the dimensions go. So that's sort of a quick tour of the camera. Let's get into the more exciting parts of this camera. Now with the ZV-E10, something that I'm really happy that they've really addressed well is audio. Right off the bat, we see a much bigger microphone than we do with other cameras. What's cool about this is that we now don't just have a mono input, we have a stereo input. So if you listen to this next clip coming up, you'll hear as I move from one side of the frame to the other, my sound will go with it. Here, this is the stereo microphone, which is very cool. If you are listening to us in stereo, you're going to hear me go from one side to the other, which is very cool. So as I explore the space here, you're going to hear the sound transfer from one side of the screen to the other side of the screen as I walk back and forth between these 2 points. A nice little touch from Sony is that if you are recording on a breezy or windy day, the audio quality can really quite suffer. So with bigger microphones, we have a dead cat. On this one here, we have a tiny little thing here that fits into the hot shoe and covers the microphone and greatly improves the quality on a windy or breezy day. If you want to get better quality audio than the in-camera mic can produce, you can certainly add an additional microphone. Now with the hot shoe that Sony has, you can use their own microphones that plug in with no wires needed, but you always have the option to plug in other microphones like this one here. This is the Sennheiser MKE200. Plug that into the 3.5mm jack and you replace the internal microphone with this external microphone and get better quality audio that way. Now here's where I do like that articulating screen off to the side because it doesn't block what I can see if I'm on the other side of the camera. With the A6100, the way its screen is articulated, it's going to be blocked by any microphone you plug into the hot shoe. So something I just noticed as I'm setting up this shot, which is interesting, I do like the articulating screen being able to face me when I'm recording. However, if I want to tilt it up just a little bit, the image flips upside down. It's kind of annoying. When When it comes to video with the ZV-E10, we are topping out at 4K 30 frames per second at 100 megabits per second. Now it's pretty decent quality video that way, and if you want to play around with the smooth and quick mode and go some slow motion, you can go down to full HD video at up to 120 frames per second. Something else that I'm quite happy about that Sony's included with this camera to make it a lot more video specific is the inclusion of a bunch of preset profiles and log files. Now we can take that extra step if we want to and really polish our videos in post-production. Something else that's going to help you with your content creation, especially if you're hand holding the camera, is it does have stabilization. Now it is digital and it comes at a bit of a crop, a 1.4 crop to be exact. So if you're holding the camera in front of you, you're going to have to use a little wider angle lens to get everything in. Now there are a few gimmicky features here, or I thought they were gimmicky features when I first saw some of the specs on this camera. And one is called a product showcase mode, and it is purpose built for people who are showing off certain products in their vlog or content creation. Now this is where this camera is very cool because we have interchangeable lenses. So if I want to improve my image quality, one of the big ways I can do that is by upgrading the lenses. So I'm spoiling myself today because I'm using the 24G Master lens right here. Now the product showcase mode is going to go from the product back to my face almost instantly, which is a kind of a cool feature. And I honestly thought it was a bit gimmicky when I first heard about it. We saw it in a previous camera, and I like it here as well. If you're into content creating or vlogging, one of the biggest things you can do to increase that quality is put a better quality lens on. So now I've put on that G Master 24 1.4 lens. Now it's a fantastic lens and it's given me the ability to have a much shallower depth of field. Take a look at these clips here as I'm standing in front of the camera, and as I move around, even at 1.4 aperture, the depth of field is very shallow. The autofocus easily keeps up with me with that real-time autofocus tracking. One of the buttons on top of the camera is their Defocus Control, and it's kind of a cool button, but it has its limitations. Basically what it does, if you're not experienced with depth of field and how to make it work, you push this button and it opens the lens up to its maximum aperture and gives you the shallowest depth of field. However, if you're shooting video, you run into some problems because often the shutter speed goes much higher than it needs to be, and anything that's moving in the frame looks really out of place. Take a look at the water samples behind me here. So right now I'm on full program, letting the camera decide everything for me. And as soon as I push that defocus control, it goes from f11 down to f1.4, and you'll see that the water behind me, how it changes from a nice sort of flowing smooth water to almost like stopped in motion. As we're starting to wrap up our shoot here today, I want to talk about this camera from a photography standpoint. That's what I'm more comfortable with. And I found myself a little frustrated. I kept wanting to bring the camera up to my eye, but it doesn't have an electronic viewfinder, so I'm forced to use the rear screen. Now that being said, it's not a bad stills camera at all. It still has the same specs as the 6100. We can shoot up to 11 frames per second, which is quite nice, and that 24 megapixel sensor certainly gives you the resolution that I need. However, I do miss that viewfinder, and I do find the functionality of it works more towards the video camera and now vlogging side of things than I do as far as a stills camera. So I look at the target audience of this camera are people that really want to step up their content creation game. Here we have a camera that we can interchange lenses with and get a much better quality optic and aesthetic with much faster aperture lenses. Look at that 24mm I was using today. It is gorgeous, and it actually made me look okay, even without the skin smoothing mode that has this camera built into it, which that I think is a bit gimmicky. That's not for me, but I think there's people out there that are going to love that. Where I did find the product showcase mode was very handy. I thought that was going to be a gimmick, but it was pretty good. But overall, I think this camera really does a good job of being a very small, potent content creating kit that you can carry around with you everywhere. Now, I of course want to know what you guys think of this camera. Is there a mode on here that you really love, or you don't love, or you think they could have done something much better? Make sure you leave the comments down below. Follow us both on Instagram. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell. We'll catch you again next time. Hey, thanks for sticking around and watching our review on the Sony ZV-E10. If you want to check out our more recent content, click up here. And if you are Canadian and you want to shop local, check out thecamerastore.com down here.